The Lord be with you. A reading of the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus proposed another parable to the crowd, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone was asleep, however, his enemy came and sowed weeds through all the wheat and then went off. When the crop grew and bore fruit, the weeds appeared as well. The slaves of the householder said to him, 'Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where have these weeds come from?' And the master answered, 'An enemy has done this.' His servant said, 'Do you want us to go and pull them up?' But he replied, 'No, if you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until harvest time. And then at harvest time, I will say to the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles for burning, but gather the wheat into my barn.' And Jesus told them another parable. 'The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a person took and sowed in a field. It is the smallest of all seeds, yet when full grown is the largest of plants. It becomes a large bush, and the birds of the sky come and dwell in its branches.' And he told them yet another parable. 'The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into 3 measures of wheat flour until the whole batch was leavened.' Jesus spoke all these things to the crowds in parables, and he spoke only in parables in order to fulfill what the prophet had said, 'I will open my mouth in parables and will announce what is lain hidden from the foundation of the world.' Then, dismissing the crowds, Jesus went into the house, and his disciples approached him there and asked, 'Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field.' Jesus replied, 'The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the evil one. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Now, just as weeds are collected and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. For the Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all who cause others to sin and all evildoers. They will throw them into the fiery furnace where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears ought to hear this.'" The Gospel of the Lord. I love the little house that I live in. Has an interesting story. The rectory of the church used to be what is now the Ambulance Association headquarters up on Georges Hill. But for lots of reasons, around 2006, we decided to actually sell that and transfer the offices down here. And part of that process was to get the buy on the side a little place that just I could live in. So they bought this little house over on Old Waterbury Road, which is really beautiful, 1,500 square feet, little Cape Cod house, perfect. Now, history tells us that the lineage of people who own that house, a couple of people before we owned it, one of the people was a master gardener. So almost in orchestrated fashion, every year in the springtime, the daffodils sprout, and then the tulips, and then another wave of other kinds of plants. I even noticed this morning there's new things coming out now. They had it all timed almost, so it lasts through the spring and summer. It's really a beautiful place. Now, I'm not a gardener, so I don't know a lot about that stuff, but I do pick weeds. So I go out to pick the weeds, and as I look around, pull them all up and do my duty there, Sometimes, again, I don't know a weed from a flower, and so sometimes some of the flowers get picked in the process. But it's, I do it, and it's kind of my little contribution to the efforts of keeping the place pretty, and it's really nice to be out there and close to the earth. My experience there, doing that, helps me to understand what Jesus was talking about in the parable today. Weeds and wheat growing up side by side. Where do they come from? We don't know. But they do offer, they kind of stand side by side, and unless they have somebody there to pull out the weeds, they'll stay till the end of the season, get caught in all. In the parable, see, Jesus was pointing out, and of course all these parables in this section of Matthew's Gospel, they're all about the reign of God. More to the point, they're all about how the reign of God comes about, how it is born. And these three parables, in addition to the one from last week, are all pointed in that direction. And they talk about the wheat and the weeds side by side. Now, I know that from my ventures in the garden, but even more so, I know it from the experience of my own life. The way God created us, again with free will, the ability to choose and to choose freely, means that obviously we have to make some choices, and it's in making those choices that the reign of God comes about, not just in our life, but in the life of the larger community. And how we each experience the weeds and the wheat, at least how I do, is I know in my own life that there is a movement in my life that is clearly of God, that moves me in the direction of choices and values and decisions that will advance God's way in the world. And so, obviously I try to do that. But I also know that there's another force, a force that at times really seems, well, pretty much most of the time seems like it's urging me in the direction that goes against God's way. God's Spirit is always recognized by what it stirs up in us. Does it bring peace? Does it advocate for honesty and truth and justice and compassion and forgiveness and mercy? All those things that Jesus spoke about. That's the way we determine that that's really the Spirit of God, if those are the directions in which it leads. But the other spirit draws me to be self-centered, self-absorbed, cranky, impatient, unkind, quick to judge, those kinds of things that are clearly not of God's Spirit, see? But they go on side by side in me, and I suspect they go on side by side in you. If this doesn't sound familiar to you, please stand up and we'll submit your name for canonization over to Rome. Because really, every human person experiences that. The conscious movement of God's grace and the movement of a spirit that goes against God. The spirit of the evil one, as Jesus says in the gospel. And we're called to make choices for God's way. We're called to make those choices that will somehow make God's reign more real and active and present in the world. And that's how it's coming. The added two parables that Jesus uses today highlight the fact, the yeast and the mustard seed, that something small and almost unrecognizable, that's how it starts. That's how the reign of God comes. That's how the reign of God employs our choices for the things of God to make the way of God more real here in our world. Shortly after he was elected to be Pope, Pope Francis gave an interview to a Jesuit journal. And the editor of the journal, who was also a Jesuit, interviewed him. And he was trying to figure out what questions to ask Pope Francis. And so his first question that he asked was, who is Jorge Mario Bergoglio? It's Pope Francis's birth name or given name. And Pope Francis stopped and he thought, And the writer panicked. He said, oh, gee, maybe I stepped over a line and asked too personal a question. You know, he's the Pope. Who am I? And he starts to apologize, and Pope Francis says, no. I want to just make sure I answer it right. He said, I am a sinner in need of God's mercy. I am a sinner in need of God's mercy. They eventually put this interview into a book. It's called A Big Heart Open to God. Isn't that a great title? A Big Heart Open to God. And so Pope Francis was saying, you know, like all of us, he has that temptation to sin, and he sins, and he needs forgiveness. And he has the capacity for good, like all of us do, to do God's way, and all of us are moving in that direction. I think it's really important to know that both of those things are going on in every one of us. I think it's a great insight into and self-knowledge to be able to recognize that. And recognizing it helps us then to live out of that and to be a part, not of blocking the reign of God, but of helping the reign of God along in the world. I don't know about you, but these days of COVID and upheaval in our nation and all sorts of things going on are a time of great tension, and it's disrupted and disordered just about every end of our lives. I think in all of us, not too far below the surface of our skin, is a level of intensity and anxiety that stirs us. And it can lead us, I think, to allowing certain buttons in ourselves to be pushed that bring forth not the best. I think it's good, especially in listening to the parables of the kingdom today, to maybe at this time in a particular way be alert to that movement in each of us, so that we really might be a part of God's great effort to bring about the reign of God, the reign that God desires in our world and in all of us.